Welcome in, everybody, to Beyond the Beat with 32 Beat Writers. My name is Zach Hyduk, and tonight you may see that I am by myself running a solo show here to go over some news quick and answer some of your questions. If you got them, please feel free to put them down below in the comments, whether you're watching on X or on YouTube. You can find us over there if you didn't know that, by the way. Make sure to check us out. Before we get started and too far into things, I did want to take some time just to let you know about Fast Draft Fantasy, the fastest growing, fastest best ball on the planet. It's a different form of best ball with 6 lightning fast rounds. You can set up point boosters for extra upside. It's all very exciting. Make sure to check that out at fastdraft.app for more information. All right, we'll go ahead and get right into it, guys. Here, we're going to be very, very casual tonight. Just taking some time here from my home renovations, and so I figured I'd hop on and just see, what we could talk about and answer some of your questions. You'll notice my background is a little bit different. I hope to have that more official looking here in the next couple of days. So again, we'll be answering your questions here in a little bit. Looks like we've already got a lot of them coming in, so keep them coming. Will go about as long as we can. If we don't have too many questions, we'll keep it short, and if we get a lot, then we'll keep it going for as long as you can tolerate me or I can tolerate you, I suppose. So obviously, I want to mention really quickly, I have a beat writer voicemail coming up, so we're going to get through a couple of pieces of information and then stick around for that. Wide receiver Ricky Pearsall shot. Obviously, I'm sure all of you have seen that wild turn of events. Keeping track of that in real time, it was crazy, to get the notification that the guy was shot in the chest. If you've been following us, of course, on Twitter, then you actually saw the video of him walking to the ambulance and being shown that direction. If that was happening, it immediately made me feel a little bit better. Obviously, any gunshot wound is super serious. So I'm not taking that lightly in any capacity. But man, the fact that he's out of the hospital now as of today, I believe, and was walking around, the fact that it went in where it did, I mean, you could see the wound and everything. That was wild. So yeah, anyways, he seems to be better. That comes, of course, right on the back of the Brandon Aiyuk extension, which I'll toot my own horn a little bit. I'm sure you guys have been, totally overwhelmed with Brandon Aiyuk news, so I'm not going to add to that noise too much. But I will say that I called this a long time ago. I'm very pleased with myself for that. I think at this point in time, it's just, if you bet on the fact that the wide receiver mainly is going to stay with the NFL team, if they're a superstar wide receiver, chances are it's going to be difficult for that team to move on from them, whether the wide receiver would rather play somewhere else or not. And I think really AJ Brown seems to be the only exception, and the guy who made that mistake was fired. So seems like he'll be staying in town, and you can make that bet 9 times out of 10 when the next opportunity comes up for somebody such as Jamar Chase or anybody else. I want to get real quick. Let me play the audio here for you. I asked beat writer Pete Sweeney for some information and his take on this next bit of news. Samaje Perine, of course, running back, signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. So for that, we will go to Pete Sweeney of Arrowhead Pride.
Hello to 32 Beat Writers. This is Pete Sweeney with Arrowhead Pride, Sports Radio 810 and KSHB 41 in Kansas City. I was asked to make a comment about the running back room of the Chiefs now that it includes Isaiah Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, undrafted rookie Carson Steele, and a pass-catching back veteran, Samaje Perine. Right now, I would believe that going to be no different when it comes to the first running back touching the football. This is Isaiah Pacheco's job to lose. He did a great deal of work. I wrote about it the other day, just trying to become a 3-down back in the offseason, working on pass protection, working on his routes and pass catching. But still, Kansas City is always looking out for other opportunities to bolster positions, and I just tend to think the way that things have gone with Carson Steele and his training camp emergence, I wonder if he will be the short yardage, that goal line type of back. The Chiefs, if there's anything to complain about in recent years, it's sometimes they're a little questionable when it comes to short yardage. Carson Steele seems to me to be an exclamation point answer to that. And then, as much as Pacheco worked in the offseason, it's hard to believe that the Chiefs wouldn't use Perine a lot on 3rd and 5, third and long, when you need someone who is been very good at protecting the quarterback and very good when it comes to screens, which is just a tremendous part of Andy Reid's game. Andy Reid was asked about Perine in his Zoom conference call on Friday, and he referenced the 2021 AFC title game when Perine had a 41-yard screen that he ran all the way down the field and got the Bengals back into a game that they ultimately won. It's always good to, I think, remember which coaches are watching when certain teams are playing other teams, because that clearly stuck in Andy Reid's mind, and now he has Perine as a member of his offensive arsenal. So just to wrap up, I think Isaiah Pacheco is no doubt your first and second down back. I wonder about Carson Steele for short yardage in the goal line, and certainly all signs point to Samaje Perine being that third down pass catching back. If you want to check out anything on the Chiefs, I have a X or Twitter at PG Sween. You could, of course, check out arrowheadpride.com. Thanks for asking me to do this.
All right. Well, thank you, Pete, again for leaving that voicemail for us. I appreciate all the beat writers, of course, who do come on the show and do leave us that exclusive content and information. So appreciate that. Check Pete out at PG Sween, or of course, as he mentioned, Arrowhead Pride. So yeah, to me, another thing just to mention, Pete on his Twitter said that he would not be surprised at all in response to a question that he got if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not active this Thursday. Now, I don't think a lot of you, if you're talking from a fantasy perspective, were drafting, CEH much anyways, but that does mean and open up potential roles for somebody like Carson Steele or Samaje Perine a lot quicker. There was some comments. Wow, I'm blanking. And this is why you don't do solo shows too often, because you're just going to forget everybody's name. Mitchell Schwartz, former lineman for the Chiefs, seems to think that Samaje Perine would be able to fit fairly quickly into a third down role there with the Chiefs. So I expect him to have a fairly large role for a guy who just joined very, very recently. So expect to see that. If you're looking that out. In news related to that, CEH was not at practice today. We're not going to get any injury reports for anybody today. We'll get to that a little bit as well. So watch out for that on potentially Monday, Tuesday, this coming week for guys that are questionable. Jacoby Brissett was named as the starter over Drake May. I think there was some questions in New England as to whether that would be the case or not, but this has been the plan all along, and it looks like the coaching staff and the leadership there is sticking to that. Just something to note. We'll see how long that lasts. I'm hoping to talk to Evan Lazar this week before the season starts if we can. I have been trying to schedule him for the past week or so, and our schedules just have not lined up. He was our very first guest on the podcast, and so hoping to get him back on and talk Patriots. Marshawn Lloyd, this is pretty decent and big news, was back at practice today for the Packers. Rookie running back. No injury report, as I mentioned, so we can only hope he's good to go for this weekend, but he was not put on IR as was initially thought that he might. And, A.J. Dillon is no longer basically part of that team for the year. So that could be relevant. They do play in Brazil, so I don't know, on a Friday, so I don't really know if they want to get a rookie involved too much against the Eagles defense on the road in another country, but we shall see how that turns out, and at least it's good to see him back. So I'm going to get to some of the questions that you guys had on our initial tweet out a couple of days ago, and then we'll start answering those that are in the chat. So if you have not yet put those in the chat, let me just grab a drink here and we will continue. For any of you who have seen any of my guest appearances, you'll know that I had a coughing fit on one, and I'm trying to avoid that here. I've been doing these home renovations, and it has been eating up my lungs. Maybe I need to get a better respirator or something. Okay, let's get to it. At Bow Me asks, who is your week 1 waiver wire pickup? I assume that the question is in relation to who we're going to be anticipating picking up after week 1 is done here, of course. So for me, there's a couple of guys I'm looking at. This guy may or may not be drafted, depending on where you're looking at, and it's Demario Douglas for New England. And the thing I'm looking for is just to kind of see if he's kind of the clear target getter there. Somebody is going to be relevant some weeks. And if Jacoby Brissett is the starter, I at least believe that he's able to get the ball to somebody like that enough. Again, hoping to talk to Evan Lazar here this week and we can get more information on that. Another thing I'm looking out for is if Jamar Chase does not play. He hasn't been at practice and I haven't seen any updates that I am aware of. We would be curious to see how Jermaine Burton handles week 1. And that's a guy that I would maybe keep an eye on, and maybe if you can pick him up prior to week 1, just speculatively. I personally don't expect Chase to be out like long term. I don't think it really benefits anybody to be out a full year. I feel pretty strongly about that. I mean, he's one of the better wide receivers in the league, obviously, but there's just not a lot of leverage that somebody like that has unless they're willing to completely not accrue a season, and lose a bunch of money. So that's just really tough. And I don't anticipate that. But in the off chance he misses a couple of games and I'm totally wrong, and you have a bottom spot at the edge of your roster, you're willing to shove somebody like Jermaine Burton, I would look at that. Kyle asks, what is the snap share between Rachaad White and Bucky Irving in Tampa? I expect White to get, what he did last year, basically. Personally, Irving does do what White does as a pass catcher. So, we'll have to see what competition plays in there. Obviously, Rachaad White is not a super efficient runner, or at least wasn't last year. Rookies do tend to come on slow in the passing game, though. So at least from, they tend to not be trusted right up front with blocking and all of that type of thing. So I would just expect Rachaad White to get what he had this whole time previously. Ken asks, who is truly the top Chargers and Bills wide receivers? No tight end, please. I will say I feel like Palmer may be the guy for the first couple weeks while Ladd McConkey gets his legs under him in Los Angeles there for the Chargers. If Ladd McConkey is not the wide receiver 1 within the first couple of weeks, I think both the Chargers and everybody else would be pretty sad and disappointed. So he needs to be that guy. I don't know if he can be a typical wide receiver 1 in the NFL sense going forward. We'll have to see. He certainly is not exactly that mold. And we talked to Matt Harmon earlier this spring about guys, and so we'll see how that plays out. But I would expect him to be the top points getter. And if he's not, then, everybody should be pretty disappointed. The Bills, I'm going to say Curtis Samuel. I think a lot of people want it to be Keon Coleman. I personally was not a huge Keon Coleman believer. Great guy, obviously, based on what we can see in the media, but I just don't have a lot of faith in his consistency. He's a rookie. He's a deep threat, I get, and he's the only real legitimate, like prototypical type of wide receiver. But Curtis Samuel's basically a lock for 600 yards, on 90 targets or so every year, if you look at his history. And I just feel like we're going to get more of that. So we'll probably be looking at Curtis Samuel, unfortunately. Now, of course, Keon Coleman has the upside. So I'm not telling you to take Curtis Samuel everywhere you can in your drafts. But if I'm going to make a bet on who's going to be the most consistent guy, who's going to be the most helpful for that team for the majority of the year, it's probably going to be Curtis Samuel, in my humble opinion. Tony, we'll take this question and then we'll get to the live ones. So if you've got more questions, please keep them coming in here. Tony asks Zach Moss or Chase Brown. I'm going to go with Zach Moss, even at ADP. And if we look here, let me actually pull that up. Zach Moss is still being drafted at RB 29. I mean, they're going to have a good offense. And I believe personally that he's going to be drafted like he's being drafted later than he should. And I just believe that he's going to get the usage here. So Chase Brown, RB 36. I mean, you can speculatively add him, of course. He's at like the 106 spot in half PPR leagues. So, he's fairly cheap there. But around him, I prefer guys like Brian Thomas, certainly somebody like Jerome Ford, Lad McConkey we just talked about. So guys like that who are going after him are who I would prefer at the wide receiver position. If you're going 0 RB, I think Zach Moss is a decent, shot there. So I'd be looking at that. Let's get to some questions here. We had some to start. Let me see if I can read through these here. See if we have anything good. All right. My league does kick return, punt return points. So I'm kind of thinking Malik Washington is a stash. I know they have various plus. Can he see the field? I already have Mims and Shaheed. Only guy I could drop is Pop Douglas. So all the guys you named, I think, should be, other than Mims, should be more productive, I think, out the gate. So Malik Washington, he's a guy, I mean, I added in my dynasty league. So this depends on if you're talking dynasty or redraft. Redraft, I don't think he's really worth hanging on to unless something happens. Obviously, in a dynasty league, you're super interested. But I would prefer all the guys that you named before I would take on Malik Washington, although I do think he has probably the better upside out of those guys, especially if something were to happen to Waddle, who I believe should be ready for the season, but there's some weird stuff going on around that, and I hope to have some better information this week. All right, for fantasy, which player has risen the most over the past few weeks? Probably Rashee Rice. I could be wrong in that, but that's just off the top of the dome here, so don't hold me to it too much here. But Rashee Rice, obviously, and this is something to note. You need to be earlier on him than your home leagues are going to be, and you need to draft him ahead of where the ADP is. His ADP, of course, is all over depending on the platform. But if you want to get him in the 5th, in the 4th, I mean, the fantasy footballers were talking about this too, so I don't want to just parrot everything that I was actually listening to them earlier yesterday or the day before, but you can listen to their most recent episode for more on that. But I'd expect Rashee Rice to be that guy, and he's certainly a deal now that his legal proceedings, for as much as we can tell, won't be impacting his season this year. I'd expect next year. Half point PPR, Gibbs or Garrett Wilson. Let's see. So Gibbs right now is going pretty high, and Garrett Wilson, of course, is the same. I don't know how much faith I have in Aaron Rodgers. I know that sounds crazy, but at least crazy in the sense like how much you think that it impacts Garrett Wilson. But I did get Garrett Wilson at a heck of a steal. I think some people are scared, and I got him at like pick 20 in my last fantasy draft. So if you can get him for a price like that, I mean, heck, who cares, right? But Jahmyr Gibbs is, I don't think you can go wrong with either guy, but at price, ADP tends to be around 12 for Garrett Wilson ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm definitely going Gibbs there if I'm in that spot, and then grabbing a wide receiver. I think that tier of wide receiver, you might be able to get somebody like a Nico Collins, a Drake London, if you're lucky, somebody like that. I'd be happier with the Jahmyr Gibbs and like a Mike Evans than I would be with like a Garrett Wilson. And let's see, maybe a James Cook or somebody like that. Those are just, names I'm putting out there, but gives you kind of a frame of reference here. Week 1, start 4, Puka, DK, Waddle, London, Pickens. Yep, start them in that order, leave Pickens off. I heard Nico Collins has been rising up draft boards. He's going early 3rd, but not sure where he started. Pretty sure Trey McBride has been rising also, at least in non-tight end premium. I really like Trey McBride this year. I'm not looking at an ADP tracker or anything like that, so I'm not going to be able to address things super directly there for you. But I will say that I really, really like Trey McBride. You should see a hot takes and season predictions article coming out from us this week. We've got a lot of stuff on that, all kind of related to some of these questions here, which is good to look out for. Maybe Monday or Tuesday we'll be posting that, so keep an eye out for that. I have Trey McBride as a guy that I just absolutely love this year. I understand that Marvin Harrison Jr. is in town now. I don't think that really hurts McBride. If anything, that may help him, keeping that offense going. Drew Petzing there is a really good offensive coordinator, and Kyler Murray should be able to get to the ball to more than just one wide receiver. So, yeah, and also he should potentially be the second target. I know I like Michael Wilson, but it's very possible that you have the number 2 target in Trey McBride. So let's see. Let's keep moving along here. Let me grab another question. I'm out on Nico's ADP. Tank was CJ's go-to when they were both healthy. I think that this is really interesting, right? We've seen CJ Stroud come out and say how, Tank Dell is his man, is his guy. And if you're looking, I believe Dell is going, let's see, let me just make sure I'm accurate on this here, okay, for you. Tank Dell right now around wide receiver 29, pick 64. And you've got Nico all the way up at, I believe, wide receiver 14. Now, I really like Nico Collins. I do think he is the one there. If I'm ranking them personally, I'm going Nico, Dell, Diggs. And in this scenario, Diggs is the bad value because he's going ahead of Tank Dell by, I think, 7 wide receiver spots, about 20 picks. So for me, and this is just my personal thing, but I'm totally out on Stephon Diggs. Now, you can take a shot, but I prefer guys like Kenneth Walker around there. DK Metcalf, of course, is close. You got Devonta Smith, who I'd way prefer. Malik Neighbors is a good shot there as well. And we just talked about Trey McBride, and he's going a little later than that as well. So that is my opinion on that comment. I am surprised Chiefs running backs haven't been more valuable over the past years, especially with the wide receiver group generally lacking since Tyreek Hill left. Well, Pacheco's been really, really good over the last little bit, and CEH, of course, you could kind of consider a bust. So perhaps that has something to do with it. I think Pacheco has been pretty good, though. Each guy who's been there has just been a little bit limited in his capabilities. Obviously, Kareem Hunt, with all of the nonsense that happened there, would have been a guy that they would have loved to keep around and would have been good for fantasy, and that just didn't happen. So it happens. Rome Odunze finishes the year as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. Yes or no? Top 24, man. That's just, look, I like Rome Odunze a lot, but he's got 2 things going against him. He could be, I'm not saying he definitely is, but he could be wide receiver 3 on this team. And he has a rookie quarterback. And rookie quarterbacks, no matter how good they are, just generally don't support a top 36 wide receiver, and generally don't support multiple. Now, there has been some changes to that. Obviously, we can look at somebody we just talked about in CJ Stroud, who supported some good wide receivers last year. But for me, I don't love taking the risk. Now, Chicago is in a much better spot than a lot of rookies are. And as you know, we just talked to Courtney Cronin a couple days ago, a week or two. And so if you have some more questions on that, go listen to that episode there. As far as finishing a top 24 wide receiver, man, I'm going to bet against that every time. That doesn't mean that he might not be good towards the end of the season. Right now, he is going at wide receiver 39. So, I mean, you can get him a whole heck of a lot cheaper than that, but I just wouldn't bet on that personally. And then you got the same question for Xavier Worthy. Man, everybody's probably, if you were, I don't want to be this guy, but I'm kind of a Worthy hater, not because he's not going to be helpful for that team, but until the Chiefs can show me that they can draft wide receivers, I'm not sure I'm going to believe it. I believe Rashee Rice is still the number one there. He's not serving a suspension this year. You still have Kelsey there. I almost said George Kittle, but you still have Kelsey there. That doesn't count now the targets that'll be going to Samaje Perine on some third downs and such of that nature and screens and whatnot. I think Worthy will be more helpful for the Chiefs than he will for your fantasy team. I'm going to say no, he doesn't finish as a top 24 guy, which might be a hot take. But again, he's being drafted at wide receiver 38, so he doesn't have to hit that to, pay off for your fantasy team. But I just am not. You're probably asking the wrong guy if you want that hype, but there's a lot of people out there who would disagree with me, including several people on the 32 Beat Writers staff. So don't take my word completely as gospel, but that's kind of my opinion. Let me see. Who is the Cowboys running back to own? We talked with Dave Hellman of Fox not too long ago, this last week on the show as well, actually. So I would advise you checking out that episode, of course, but I do not believe that it is Dalvin Cook. So far as I know, he's still on the practice squad. Perhaps they try to make room for him. I don't know for game days, but until we see that actually happen, certainly not him. If I'm taking a shot, I think it's going to be Rico Dowdle. I don't particularly believe any of them. So if your question is who's the Cowboys RB to own, or should I own any Cowboys RBs, I don't know that I would personally. If I could avoid it, Ezekiel Elliott currently running back 38 at pick 111, and Dowdle is not too far behind at 133, running back 44. Forgive me. So yeah, I mean, I'd take Dowdle. I think he has a bigger upside, but Zeke is the pass catcher. So in my opinion, it's going to be a gross bunch of muck that I don't want to be involved in. So that's my personal opinion, unless I really go zero RB. And in that case, I'm taking Dowdle and just hoping it works out personally. Full PPR, Terry McLaurin or Javonte Williams. Okay, so again, we got another wide receiver with a rookie quarterback who likes to rush. Terry McLaurin is going at pick 68. And we can get Javonte here in a second, if I can spell things correctly. He's going at running back 27 down at pick 81. So, yeah, I mean, I think Javonte. I am not, again, you got a rookie quarterback there as well. I don't think they're going to score a ton of points, but if you're going zero RB, I think that he's a decent guy to grab too. I do like guys around him, such as Calvin Ridley, maybe Deontay Johnson, but in that range, Brian Robinson's going after him as well. So I want to say Terry McLaurin. I mean, he's the only guy really in town catching passes for them for the most part. So I don't know. Maybe you can't go wrong, but I'm nervous about Terry, and maybe he puts up a wide receiver, 18 season again, but I really want him. I own him in Dynasty, and I've really, really enjoyed having him, and I think he's really, really good, but I just don't know if that's always going to work out in an upside way. So if I'm taking an upside guy, I'm taking Javonte Williams there. J.K. Dobbins or Tony Pollard. I mean, Dobbins is going to be way cheaper, or should be. Dobbins pick 130 right now off the board, and then Pollard, I think, is significantly higher. Yeah, 78. But if I want to start one, obviously I'm going to be starting Pollard. If I'm drafting at value, I still probably am taking Pollard. I do think I talked with Justin Graver, and if Justin's listening here, feel free to comment if you're there. But Justin Graver of Titans Film Room, also he's the Call podcast producer and host. Dan would probably get upset at naming him host, but he's a good participant over there, and obviously a key piece of what they do. Anyways, but Titans Film Room he hosts, and he does a really, really good job. We had him on as an expert earlier this spring after the draft, and Tony Pollard, I think, will be the guy. He was a little iffy, thinking that one guy would probably get 5 to 10% more than the other. So that may be the way that it shakes out. For me, though, I'm probably taking Pollard in the scenario here with this question. Dobbins is just guaranteed so little, and while I like him at cost, if I have any confidence in one, it's going to be Pollard. Would you rather roster Jalen Polk or Josh Downs in non-PPR? Josh Downs. Polk is a rookie. As much as I hope he can be something. Josh Downs, I think, has a bigger upside. There was a lot of news coming on about how well he was doing in training camp. So keep an eye out for Josh Downs and that injury to see how he navigates that. The doubts there would, of course, in my opinion, be with Anthony Richardson. You also have two other wide receivers that may be ahead of him by the time he gets healthy, but I didn't have a lot of faith in A.D. Mitchell, the rookie, personally. Again, like, I'm not a hyper film guy and a hyper draft guy, but that's just my opinion on things. So I think when Downs comes back, the likely role is that he slots in the wide receiver too. That seemed to be the trend through training camp prior to that injury. And so that's the route that I would go. Which quarterback tight end pair do you prefer in PPR? Kyler paired with Brock Bowers or Jaden Daniels paired with Kyle Pitts? Or Caleb? Love this. I don't think you can really go that wrong, to be honest. I think Jaden Daniels could be a top 10 quarterback, and I think Kyler's locked in at that as well. Brock Bowers, you're hoping, if he's not in the top 12, I think everything's broken, although his quarterback play is not going to be amazing. So we'll see how that goes. Flip a coin, but I'd probably take Kyler and Brock Bowers. I think, no, dang. I hate to make this. Let's go Jaden Daniels and Kyle Pitts. I'd go Jaden Daniels and Kyle Pitts, but I don't think you can go wrong with either. Would you reach for Rice and take him over Waddle, Debo, or Kupp? Not over Kupp. Debo, yes. Waddle, Waddle, no. I think you can wait longer. I just think you can wait longer. So I should say, when I'm saying this, that I'm not saying I would draft Rice at, in round 2 or 3, but I think you'll be able to get him in round 4 or 5. And so I would grab him earlier than that, because his ADP right now is way, way down the board right now at 70, and that's probably with it climbing. So just keep a lookout for that. Let's find some more questions. Keep them coming, guys, if you got them. We'll wrap up here soon. We're at about 35 minutes. So if you got anything, make sure to get it in. What's going on with the Falcons? Is Kirk Cousins, and Kyle Pitts healthy? Yeah, as far as I know, nothing's changed recently, and Kirk has been very, very good. We had Daniel Flick on of Sports Illustrated. You can go back and listen to that show again at Beyond the Beat. Check that out, guys. If you haven't before, search Beyond the Beat anywhere you get your podcast. It'll come up. And that, he mentioned that Kirk is full go. There's no anticipation that he's limited in any capacity at this point. And Kyle Pitts, from my understanding, it's a good question, because last year he did not appear fully healthy, and this year he hopefully should be. Now, I don't know. We had a Kyle Pitts question earlier too. I don't know what you're going to get from him, but he should be the second target, with Bijan Robinson being the third. So you want guys, that could be the second target there, hopefully, if not the first, of course, in some cases like Kelsey or maybe Laporta in that respect. Excuse me. But yeah. So with the Falcons, everything's good to go. I'm excited about them. If you want more information, go back and listen to that podcast, and you can get a whole heck of a lot more. What about Trey Tucker from Las Vegas? Is he going to have a steady role in the offense? Heard good things out of camp. I think they could run a lot of 12 personnel. So we'll see. 2 tight end sets. Rather, sorry, my brain is not always here with me on these later night streams. So, but again, Brock Bowers should be the guy, and I would not anticipate a lot of good offense coming out of that Las Vegas stadium or any place that they visit and they're on the road for. So it's just best case scenario, you have a guy who's most likely a career backup overperforming and just sustaining enough to give you enough production for one, maybe two guys to be productive. But I'm just not super, super big on that at all in any capacity. If you had to take a running back in round 2 of a PPR league, would you choose Kyren, Jonathan Taylor, or Barkley, and why? This is a good question, and this is hard because you might be put in the situation. I am not letting the punt return news bother me. I did message Jordan Rodriguez. I'm trying to get a little bit more information there. She covers the Rams, of course, for The Athletic. She joined the show not too long ago either. I love that you guys are asking me questions about people that we've had on, so that's good. Haven't had an Eagles person on yet this season, but we did also talk to Destin Adams for the Colts. So check that out if you haven't. I just keep plugging myself here. But in a PPR league, I'm probably choosing Kyren, man. JT, I think, is going to get sniped a little bit. That Anthony Richardson led offense. I love Jonathan Taylor, but I don't think he quite has the upside. Kyren Williams, I'm not super worried. I think recently people have been worried about the fact that Blake Corum has been getting some run with the ones. I just know, based on everything we know about Sean McVay as a person, that he kind of latches on to somebody. I don't think it's a negative thing in a way that he's getting punt return work, Kyren. That is, maybe that's just a way that McVay, he's like, oh, I love this guy so much, let's get him more involved. I don't think it's going to take away from his production, at least when it comes to the offense as a whole. So I'm not afraid. Barkley also has that rushing quarterback. I'm also very excited about Barkley. All three of these guys, great options, but Kyren, I think, is already too low and should be drafted where he's being taken right now at spot 17, running back 8. I'd take him there every day of the week. So let's see what else do we've got here to ask. Maiden Focus, by the way, thanks for all your comments every time we stream. I appreciate your dedication. There's a lot of you out there who watch every time, and I want to say thanks to you all for that. Would you rather stash Kendre Miller or Keaton Mitchell in an IR spot? Man, and I don't know. Obviously, I don't think I have to worry about him watching this. I do not like Dennis Allen's coaching job down there for the Saints. I'm probably joining the whole host of you, but the way that he talks about guys, especially Kyren, or not Kyren, especially Kendre Miller, regardless of the fact, like, I don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes there, but man, some of the quotes coming out were just brutal. And so Kyren, I think, went on the short-term IR, so he's out for a guaranteed 4 weeks. I would have to go back and check here. Let me see if I can bring up anything about Keaton Mitchell. But he's a guy that I'm not certain what his role will be. You've got Rasheen Ali there for the Baltimore Ravens as well. Should be over his injuries, as far as I'm aware. A rookie there. Man, I don't think we have had much news on Mitchell whatsoever, which is disappointing. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to give you a ton of information on him right at this moment. So who would I prefer to stash? I'd prefer to stash the guy I think that could be running back 2, possibly running back 1 for that team in the next 4 weeks. So for me, that's Kendre Miller. Again, it's been brutal there with Dennis Allen, but for me, that's where I'd go. Keaton Mitchell, I obviously really liked his upside, but Derrick Henry is going to get that run there. And until we see how that room sorts itself out, I'm not really changing, anything too much there with my assumptions on how involved he's going to be. Additionally, with Kendre Miller, I mean, you've got a guy who was undrafted, I think, in front of him for the Bills, and the name is totally escaping me right now, so forgive me for that. But he shouldn't be Jordan Mims. He shouldn't be too much of a threat unless he way overperforms. As much as I would love that to happen again for my dynasty league because I picked him up, Kendre Miller should be the one to be able to handle that if something were to happen to Kamara. So that's what I'd be going with. let's see, anything else that we can answer? Thoughts on Vidal and Lauby's value this season? So these are two running backs, Kamani Vidal and Dylan Lauby. Got to talk to Lauby at the Senior Bowl. I've probably mentioned that one too many times here, but hey, it was a fun experience for me, so I'm going to do that when I can. Dylan Lauby, man, amazing receiver. Really, 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 really good. He did have some reps, though, in the last week of training camp, I think it was, where the media just got to see a couple of times where he was, I don't know if the word was decked or steamrolled, but he's not a super big guy. And so when it comes to pass protection, it's going to be a little bit tougher. Obviously, for rookies, we already know that that's a key to them getting on the field at least. Blocking doesn't earn you fantasy points, but it does get you on the field. So, and it means that the coaches can trust you. So for me, I don't know how involved either guy is going to be this year. Vidal did make the roster, of course, and I don't know where it was coming that he may not make it. Anybody we retweeted for the most part was not saying anything like that. So whatever rumors were out there, I don't think were coming from our sources in particular. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but yeah, he's in my opinion third on the depth chart. Now, if we had Max on from 32 here in-house, he would be vehemently disagreeing with me probably and saying that Vidal is the guy. But pass catching wise, Lobby's the obvious choice. And when you're talking guys at the bottom of the roster who are rookies, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Don't love either one necessarily. I would love for Lobby to work out, but that offense is just booty probably. So we'll see what happens. And I'd go with him. Rice is a big pass for my money. Rice averaged 6 targets a game last year and now has both Worthy and Hollywood to compete with for looks. Rice will need Kelsey to miss some games to reach his ADP this year. I don't know. I just disagree because his ADP is so low. I mean, you're getting him in the 70s right now, and that just he's super efficient with the targets that he gets. Maybe you're right. Maybe we end up with a situation where a guy there just isn't super helpful. I see that as possibility. I do think, though, on an offense like that, you might have multiple guys that are useful. So as much as I enjoy being the pessimist sometimes, I'm going to choose to be an optimist here for Rice and disagree with you. But that's okay. We can all have our own opinions, and that's part of what makes everything good here as part of the group. For Dynasty PPR on a team where I keep Kyron very cheaply, please rank Corum versus Trey Benson versus Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks easily wins it for me. Going to be the guy there. No problem. Trey Benson has the easiest path to hyper production. He needs an older, never fully healthy all season. James Conner to stay, get injured. And not that I'm rooting for that. I like James Conner at his price, especially in dynasty leagues where he's going. I'd love to have him this year if I could get him cheaply. I've been trying to, and the guy who has him has been withholding him from me. So I go Brooks, Benson, Corum personally in pretty much every format. Yeah, that's my opinion. Let's see. What else do we got? As a Louisiana resident and a Saints fan, maybe I shouldn't have put this up. We'll see where this goes. I can confirm that Dennis Allen is a terrible coach, and I expect him to be gone by the bye week. The dude seems miserable to be around, and that's a recipe for disaster. I do feel like, there has not been any love lost there, and it does. I mean, I don't know if you can bet on these things yet or not. We should be able to, I suppose, depending on where you live. First coach to be fired here, I would take some money out on that maybe if I was able. I don't think I can here where I live, but if you can, maybe that's an interesting bet to place. I've got 1 or 2 minutes here, and we're going to close it out. We got a few questions, so if you've got anything quick, make it happen. Thoughts on Vidal and Lauby's value this season in Dynasty as a whole? Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of refer back to what I said earlier. Ultimately, if one's going to have long-term value, I guess it's hard because you have a better offense in the Chargers, one that will want to run the ball, a guy in J.K. Dobbins long-term that was not promised basically any money, and Gus Edwards, who's good and NFL good, but is not young either. Uh, the realistic answer here is that neither guy is going to be super valuable long term, just because of the fact that they were taken on the day of the week that they were taken on when they were drafted. Generally speaking, you're not going to get a lot of production from day 2 or day 3 guys long term down the road. I mean, take a look at the Texans. You know, it's not as if their day 2 running back taken in round 4 is currently the lead on that depth chart. Now they have had some coach changeover since that time as well, but you just don't often see guys who are taken after round 2, 3 be the guy going forward. So, again, I'll just go back to pass catching. So I guess I'm going to take Lauby. It's easier to carve out a role when you bring something that's different than somebody else can bring. And so for me, I'd probably still go with him, but I wouldn't be surprised if either guy was more valuable than the other a year or two from now. But the reality is, how valuable either of them are in 1 year or two is that neither of them are probably going to be super valuable. And that makes me sad, but that's kind of just the way it is. So, do you have a suggestion for any under the radar running back or wide receiver stashes, late round picks, or pre week 1 pickups? Yeah, this is really, really good. Let me see here. I'm going to bring up my most recent draft where I feel like I cleaned up pretty well at the end now. Granted, I think this particular draft was a 10-team league, so judge that for what you will. I know some people think that that's not playing real fantasy football. I just prefer to play however I am able. And this particular one happened to be a 10 team. So if we see here, yeah, Rico Dowdle, I think is a really good pick in the very end. I think we already mentioned him. So I like taking him near to the end if you can. Jerome Ford, again, later. That's not like a pre-week 1 pickup or anything like that. But Jerome Ford, especially, is one of my favorite zero RB picks this year. Probably heard his name a ton as it comes to that. And Jalen Wright, I think, is a really interesting stash. You've got for the Dolphins, running back rookie there. You've got a readily injured Raheem Mostert, and I just worry that again, I have an owner. I'd pick him up in certain spots, but he's not young at this point, and as little as he was utilized early in his career, at some point, that may catch up with him, and we'll see. Speed is the name of his game, as is with everybody on that roster there for the Dolphins. And Jalen Wright is also another fast guy there. And so I think he is a really interesting name to keep an eye on if you've got a spot, if it's deep enough to put him there. He may or may not be worth stashing, but I would definitely look to potentially pick him up because Achane is never going to be a super high volume guy. He might be a very productive running back for the Dolphins, but he's just never going to be a guy who's utilized as much as a workhorse running back would be utilized. And so, yeah, for me, that's kind of where I'm at with that. And I'd take Rico Dowdle, Jerome Ford, Jalen Wright, all good picks there near the end. And then wide receivers, man, let me see here. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is going a little late. I'd take him earlier than where he's going. He's not an end of the draft guy. You could take a look at Marshawn Lloyd, just to mention another running back. Wide receivers, Shaheed is interesting, but I'm not super big on that. Mike Williams, that's a good name. He will take a little bit of time to get back into the swing of things, but we've got some good news on him recently and the injury there. There's not really a wide receiver 2 on that roster outside of Garrett Wilson. So, he's an interesting guy to keep a lookout for. Certainly don't believe in Lazard. As much as it's kind of gross, Gabe Davis, maybe. Josh Downs, we already mentioned him. He's a good stash. I think he could easily be the wide receiver 2 there. So yeah, there's a couple guys for you just to keep an eye on. We talked about Pop Douglas as well. That's all the questions that we'll take tonight. We got a lot of traffic through here, so perhaps we will do this again in the near future. But for everybody who joined us here, make sure to check out our website at 32beatwriters.com, where we have player news summaries, player tracking tools, and more. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, make sure to keep up there for all of the most recent and relevant information from the Beat Writers. Make sure to use code PODCAST for 50% off your first month of a pro membership. That's code PODCAST. All of the 32 Beat Writer staff, thank you for joining in. For them, I'm Zach Hajduk, and we will see you next time.